In this episode, John Brown talks about some of the strategic advantages that clubs can achieve through clustering. And clustering is basically operating under a single centralized management in a local geographic area. So looking for clubs that might be able to consolidate and share resources and streamline their expenses, but also from the member side and the member standpoint to expand playing opportunities and improve the overall playing experience as well. So really a win-win situation and a big part of the game plan for KPI Golf as well. So John Brown, the master turnaround specialist, shares yet another strategy for us. Hope you enjoy, guys.
This is the Golf Essentials Podcast with Casey Borg.
I wanted to ask you about back when you were with Brown Golf. I know you guys talked about some really interesting solutions that had to do with clustering. So, we know that there are economies of scale when you bring on a management company to sort of centralize a lot of things, but you get even more action when clubs are geographically nearby with one another, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. That was the whole, I set the company up around that concept. Clustering was one of the very, very first key pieces of why Brown Golf existed. We tried to, every market that we went into, and we weren't always successful with this, mind you, but prior to going into that market, we tried to identify some other opportunities in that market that would allow us to cluster and to do what we did related to clustering. And, and we were successful in a lot of places. I mean, we were, highly successful in Hilton Head and highly successful in Pinehurst and, pretty darn successful in Jacksonville and, in a few other places related to our clustering efforts and adding more than one club in that market. So what it does for you is so many things. The economies of scale of hiring a management company, a one-off facility, are good. Because management companies obviously have, partnership agreements out there, vendor partnership agreements where they get, goods and materials and for less money than others would up the street and so on, which is always going to help any individual club. But as soon as you add the cluster to it, you've got so many other things that you can do. One, you can put a really good, for instance, we've had a couple of different markets here where we had 3, 4, 5, we've even had 8 clubs in one market at one time with my former company. And you could put a really top quality superintendent in place and then staff your facilities with assistant superintendents that are carrying out the general's directions, basically. Mm-hmm. That always puts you in a place where it makes your labor budget just that much more efficient. We spent a tremendous amount of time, Casey, as you know, in our clusters, just making sure that, we moved equipment efficiently. You didn't necessarily have to have, 2 or 3 pieces at every facility. If you had, a fairly good sized cluster, even a 2 club cluster, you can move carts, you can move turf equipment, you can move a lot of different things, as long as you had a trailering piece of equipment. And we always managed to do that in these marketplaces, and it saves tremendous amounts of money. It's unlikely that, for instance, if you cluster that, the 2 or 3 clubs that you have in a cluster are going to have their member guest per se on the same weekend.
Sure.
Just doesn't happen. So you can move carts around. You can move personnel around. We cross-trained everybody within the clusters. So there's, so even if one of the clubs or two of the clubs or whatever had different operating systems, we still spent the time to cross-train everybody. So it was easy for us to send somebody from point A to point B, in a heartbeat if somebody were sick or, had a car accident on the way to work or any kind of situation. It just made it that much easier for us to operate than the one-off club someplace else down the road.
Did you find in terms of staffing, it seems like you've got more opportunity for upward mobility as well, as opposed to a standalone club where there might be a ceiling in place, but when you've got that crossover where people don't have to relocate across the country, right? They could cross over to another club, take the head pro job or the GM job or whatever, right? And maybe you can recruit better talent that way.
We recruited better talents in the clusters, and you're right. We didn't have the moving expenses. We didn't have the relocation. We didn't have a lot of the things that a lot of places do have exactly because of what you just said. The other part of it too is I think if you ask the personnel that we had in those areas and in those clusters, they probably found their jobs more rewarding because they really, didn't know from day to day what was coming next. And it was really, really neat to have, they were trained in all of them. They just didn't know. So there was always kind of a new experience coming. And quite frankly, I think they've totally enjoyed that. And it works. Yeah, and it definitely works. So, the other part of this thing too is that when you go to buy equipment, let's say whatever it is, or any kind of turf equipment, you're not buying as much of it as other places do. The other thing too is when you're staffing your golf shops or when you're stocking your golf shops for your retail sales, the nice part about having the clusters is a lot of guys in single standalone stuff move their stuff out and move it down to Joe Discounter who, puts it out there for them at the end of the year as a sales kind of thing because he doesn't want to dump all the sales price stuff into his marketplace. Well, I understand that to some degree when you're a standalone golf pro and just trying to make a living, you don't want all this discounted stuff in your members' hands. I never believed in that. What we did is we'd take our stuff and just move it from one cluster to the other. And it was still new and fresh to the next group of people for at least some period of time. And it slowed our process of having to put it on sale at real deep discounts. So there's a lot of things like that are sitting out there when you have a cluster that, again, are data driven to some degree, and we've taken advantage of all of those. Food and beverage, same thing. Tea times when somebody's calling one club or whatever the tea time process is that you may use, and they don't have a tea time available for them. Well, we immediately send them down to the next cluster, the next golf course that's under our management wing.
Right.
And, so there's so we kind of keep the business in house per se, but maybe at the next place they might want to play XYZ Country Club and they're going to play ABC Country Club instead, and those kinds of things are I think are super important to be able to operate. Plus, as well as anybody that the larger volumes that you actually can purchase, the less expensive you're going to buy a product for. For instance, range balls. That's a big one when you have a cluster because range balls are fairly expensive, but you can buy enough of them that you get the absolute very best price. And being a management company, we've probably got a vendor contract with somebody where we even negotiated a better price. So, for a larger amount like that. So those are the kinds of things that sit out there and that, every cluster that I was involved with, we took advantage of that. And, you know, you and I in our new business, wherever we have the opportunity to put a cluster in place or to influence someone else putting a cluster in place and putting our stamp of operational expertise on that related to the cluster, we're going to do it every time.
Yep. Yeah, there's no downside to it. How did a lot of these clusters come to be? Were they normally sort of a single multi-facility owner, or was it more, hey, I see what these guys are doing at this facility, maybe they can help us out too, and you start to sort of own that jurisdiction?
Well, we did get some of our, a little of both, and there's a third answer to that too. I mean, some of them, you know, we're our doing. We actually purchased the facilities, and you know, we acquired the facilities and looked real hard before we did it. Okay, what's our second target here in this market, and so on. But in a lot of places where we would have a club under management, you know, we'd end up getting a second one because they knew of our cluster philosophy. I mean, it was certainly all over, you know, all the documentation that we put out and all that kind of thing, and wanting to be a part of that and seeing if that could help their facility too. So we picked up the occasional management contract from that in the same cluster market, and it is a reasonably easy sale for for a company that does it well, who's got a management contract somewhere, to go, talk with another club in that market and see if, not to set up a competition between the two. That's not the case.
Right.
What we try to do to them is have them understand that we're going to develop more revenue for both of them.
Right.
Through the cluster, and that indeed is what happens.
Yeah. It's kind of like why McDonald's and Burger King always cluster together almost, at least from the consumer side, right? Obviously not operationally, but it seems like it would benefit both clubs. And it almost seems like the second club that you pick up in a market is the easier sell, because they get all the bonuses that the original club's getting, but then the cluster bonuses as well,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It helps both of them. And quite frankly, at that point, finding that third is not out of the realm. And those are really, really important things to do. And there's not a lot of management companies that have focused on clustering, but it was, when I set up Brown Golf and started Brown Golf, it was a major part of my mindset. It truly was. And, man, for you and I, as we get into this thing and we start rolling and start adding some clubs with our new company, the cluster is going to become that much more important too as we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where the industry's going, for sure. Got to get efficient.
You got to get efficient. It's, and it's case we've said it over and over. You can't cut to profitability. You just can't. But you got to find a way to spend your dollars more efficiently. And clustering is certainly an opportunity for lots of people. There started to be a trend in the marketplace a couple of years ago when I was involved with the introduction of at least a couple of these conceptually before I started Brown Golf, when I was an executive with another large management company, and that was that clubs, private clubs in the same marketplace, would join their forces together and be operated as one club. Conceptually, that was just fantastic. It was those things are that would work just like clustering, because that's what it is. The issue with all of those, when they're private country clubs that are board run, and every one I've seen so far, there's always some kind of arrogance level coming out of one of the boards that their club is better than the other one. and they want to be weighted differently than the other guy, and so on. So that's a real tough thing to merge and marry those two clubs together, in a merger, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And if more clubs would do it and take off the arrogance thing of being better than the other guy down the road or whatever, and marry yourselves together, gives your members more playing opportunities. They can play both golf courses. Plus, you have all the benefits of clustering. Your best bet in those situations is to hire a management company and let them do it. Stay out of their way, because then you won't be fighting over, well, our superintendent's better than yours, and our golf pro's better than yours, and all of those kinds of things. But you can take advantage of the really upend stuff that you get from the cluster and from the merger in a private club situation.
Sure. I totally get that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so funny, as we develop this new company, and I guess the fun part for me is that I'm 63 years old, Casey, as you well know, and I've got so many experiences, and I just couldn't sit on the sideline anymore. I got to get back in the game here and put all these things, because I don't see anybody doing this stuff, and we got to get back in the game and help these clubs survive the downturns that happen and come out the other end really, really thriving with great turf conditions and really high member approval ratings, because that's what it's all about. I mean, our whole deal, you and me, our whole deal is based on member approval ratings, because that tells the story. And, we've got to give them, in this marketplace, it's hard to say this, we got to give them more. We probably got to spend a little less. So that means that we got to spend it more efficiently so we don't get less. And quite frankly, that can be done, but you got to be an expert at it.
Yeah. And it sounds like clustering is a big part of that strategy. And
it could well be a big part of that strategy for lots of players out there. Lots of players. And my advice to any club out there that's listening to this or hearing any of this is, get an expert opinion. Bring somebody in to talk to your board for a couple of hours about the possibilities of how to get this done and what you need to do to get started. And quite frankly, for what little bit of money that'll cost you to do it, you'll get a world worth of knowledge. And if you can pull it off, my goodness, you're going to be financially healthy. Your members will enjoy it more. And, it won't always be the grind that you're in right now.
Yeah. Awesome, bro. No, really good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. I always enjoy chatting about it, Case. We'll talk about some incredible things here in the future that I'm sure the folks will love to hear.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Hey guys, I'm all about bringing value, so shoot me all of the questions that you have, cbork@pga.com. If you like the stuff, be sure to share it and subscribe on whatever channels you're watching it on. Apple Podcasts, Google Casts, any of those channels. You should be able to subscribe easily so you get every episode. Thanks, guys.